I feel like I'm making showing you what I'm drinking like part of the vibe, part of the brand, and I'm here for it. I am 100% a beverage goblin. I always have at least two beverages with me, so maybe that's gonna be a new thing now. Anyways, welcome back. I'm so glad you decided to click on this video. It is almost mid-September, which is kind of crazy, and I can't believe like time has flown. I mean, yes, I've been preoccupied, but I can't believe it's already September. So, spooky season is here, and we are going to talk about some good books to read if you are a beginner in the horror genre. So, I know that there are YouTube channels like fully dedicated to horror books, and that this is not one of them. But I think that I generally read like a pretty like good variety of genres, and I do really enjoy horror. I have read quite a bit of horror. This is not an exhaustive list in any way. I do think that I have like a pretty good feel for some books and can definitely recommend some to read if you're like new to the genre. If you just want to like really be spooked by some paranormal, monstery, like haunted stuff, then keep watching because I think that I will have something for you. So the first book that I think is really great for you if you're just beginning in the horror genre is Episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. This book came out last winter, I think, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it had really good scares, but was not something that's gonna like keep you up at night. So this is basically the book version of like a found footage film. It's written in journal entries, interviews, transcripts, text messages, and such. So this is about a TV show that is like a ghost hunting television show led by a husband-wife team. And the husband is like totally like a ghost hunting expert. He has felt like he's had paranormal experiences before. And the wife is a physicist who is not a believer in ghosts. And basically, they like set out to um, prove or disprove whether like places are haunted, which I think is a pretty cool idea because as much as I like love like reading about ghosts and ghost stories and all of that, like I don't really believe in ghosts. So like I love having that other side of things as like built into part of the story. So that's pretty cool. So they end up as like the 13th episode of their television show. They go into this building that once housed like a paranormal investigative like bureau of sorts. So like I can't remember what it's called exactly. Paranormal Research Foundation. So they are going to go see if this place is haunted. It's in this like old house that had like some previous weirdness happening, and I thought it was great. This one definitely takes some twists. The ending, I don't remember exactly what happens, but I remember being like pretty spooked. But I don't think this is something that's going to really like, I don't know, give you nightmares. It's not gory or anything like that. It's just like really a fun horror book that I definitely recommend. My next recommendation, I could go on and on with recommendations from this author, which I'm sure you will know who it is, and that's Stephen King. But I'm going to recommend later. This is one of his hard case crime books, which is like a series produced, I don't know, by somebody. Is that the name of the publisher? I think so. But it's just like crime fiction, pulpy kind of thing. And I loved this. So this is definitely much shorter than a lot of King books. So a good way to sample his writing if you haven't dove into that world and you just want to kind of see if maybe his writing style is something you like. This is a good one to start with. So this is about a boy named Jamie who can see and talk to dead people. So his mother is the only one that knows about his secret ability, and you know, he doesn't want him talking to anyone about it or anything like that. But she's a literary agent, and she has this like big client who is a kind of like a Stephen King substitute of sorts. So like this guy who just like he doesn't need to do like James Patterson, like you know anything he writes is gonna make millions. So whatever. But then he dies before actually finishing his like book that he was working on. So his mom enlists him to go like talk to his dead body and figure out like how the book ended and all of this. In addition, his mom starts dating this police officer who wants like finds out about his ability and wants to kind of like use him to help like solve crimes and like kind of stop crimes from happening, before they happen. It's a lot of like little twists, and like I guess you could call this like less horror and I don't know, some like crime, but I mean, there's obviously something like supernatural going on if you can talk to dead people. So it is still a horror book to me. And you know, there's a weird thing that happens at the end. If you know, you know. And that's just like so classic Stephen King, like taking a perfectly good book and like throwing in something like dumb that doesn't need to be there just to make you like roll your eyes. But, anyways, definitely recommend this one. This next one is by an author that I just love. I haven't like necessarily loved every one of her books, but they just keep getting like better, and like the newer ones I enjoy a lot. It doesn't matter. Rachel Harrison, and I'm going to recommend Black Sheep. So this is definitely horror, whereas, you know, if you've watched my channel, you know that Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison is like one of my all-time favorite books, but I feel like that leans a little more like towards like I don't even want to call it like romance, but like it's not, it's way more campy, and this is like still kind of campy, but just less so. I don't know. So this is about a woman who left home at 18. She grew up in like this super like tight-knit like religious community. I'm trying to see, we're just gonna go community, not cult. But so she's like kind of been like, she can't go back home. She doesn't keep in contact with anyone. But one day she gets an invitation to her cousin's wedding to her old boyfriend, which is kind of weird. But she gets this invitation and she's like, wait, what? I'm not allowed to go back and see my family. Like, that's not a thing. I've been like shunned from my family and my religious community and all of that. And so she's like, okay, I'm gonna go. So she shows up, and there's just like a lot to unpack when she gets there. And there's like such a crazy plot twist that's like not even that far into the book, but you will be like, what? So this is so good. I definitely recommend it. It is not super gory, if I recall correctly, but don't quote me on that. But it is just like another really good intro to like horror and that kind of thing. I could just insert footage here of another video where I talked about this book because I talk about it all the time, and that is We Spread by Ian Reid. Honestly, I would recommend any of Ian Reid's books. They're more, like, they're definitely horror, but they're, like, unsettling horror versus, like, body horror or, like, paranormal horror. Like, they're very, like, social commentary, think, like, Black Mirror kind of type of horror, but and I think he only has the 3 books I've read. I'm thinking of Ending Things, Foe, and We Spread, but this is like far and away my favorite. So this is about a woman named Penny. She's an artist, and she had a partner for a long, long time who was also an artist. So he died, and unbeknownst to her, had made arrangements for her to like go to this like home basically after she had one too many like incidents of like falling or forgetting and that kind of leaving the stove on, that kind of thing. So she's like very adamant that she's like, I don't need to go here. I don't want to be here. I want to be in my house. But like basically her landlord is like, well, too bad. You're going. So she ends up going, and at first it's like, okay, there's only like 5 or 6 other residents there, and they're all also artists. So she's like, okay, like maybe we can get, you know, acquainted, and this won't be so bad. But then she starts to like have weird things going on. She is like losing chunks of time. She's a lot of confusion, and to me, like, this is the scariest part because she's like, are they gaslighting me or am I losing my memory and like going crazy? So definitely like social horror, but like, oh, one of my favorite books ever. I should do a reread. Maybe that's spooky season, because honestly, like, this book gave me a new fear of aging. So cool. We love to see it. Next is one of the only times I will ever recommend a classic because I just don't really read them, but it is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I could read this book over and over again, and I have. It's so good. So this was originally written, I think, in like the early 1900s, something like that. First published in 1938. So this follows an unnamed protagonist who is in Monte Carlo with like her as like a companion to this old lady. And she meets this man named Max de Winter, and they have like a very whirlwind, quick little romance. And then she decides that she's going to quit her job with this old lady and go marry him and go home with him to his estate, Manderley, in England. And he is a widower. His late wife, Rebecca, drowned in like this big lake or whatever behind their house. And so she goes home with Max to their estate, and things are weird because she feels as though she's being like haunted by Rebecca. Everywhere she looks are reminders of Rebecca. And yeah, it's like real creepy. This is, again, not really a gory one. This one messes with your mind and like, and obviously, book's always better. Recommend reading this, but definitely check out the original film by Alfred Hitchcock. I don't know what year it came out. I'm thinking 50 something, but it is incredible. I haven't watched, there was an updated one that came out like 3 or 4 years ago, but it's got Armie Hammer, who I don't recommend supporting. It is on Netflix if you want to watch that, but the Alfred Hitchcock version is like insane. So good, so good. So yeah, definitely pick this one up. It is one of my favorites. So this one's kind of a controversial pick because a lot of people read this and did not like it. This is a recent release, and I think that's just because a lot of people went in with expectations that are very much different from what it ended up being. Additionally, I do blame the publisher just a little because I don't think this was necessarily marketed correctly, but that is The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. So this is easily horror. Like, this should not have been marketed as a thriller in any way, and I feel like that's what happened. And so people went into this expecting it to be like a thriller, and like it's not. There's no traces of that even really in here. So this is about a woman named Alex who had a falling out with her best friend Ren. We don't really know what the fight was about, but it happened. So Alex applies for this like writing retreat where she basically, all of the people that go to this have to write a full novel in the time they're there, and then whoever's is the best will get $1 million publishing deal, because it's being hosted by this super like prolific, super famous horror author. And like she's very eccentric, she's very quirky and like kind of weird. So she ends up applying for this, getting it, and then, oh my gosh, what do you know? Ren also got accepted and is going to this. So, you know, things are kind of weird at first because this woman, Rosa, who is hosting, is a lot. And then they get stuck in a snowstorm up in, I can't remember, like maybe New York State. I don't know. And then things get real weird. And I think that there's definitely one scene in particular that a lot of people were like put off by, but like if you're expecting horror and that's what you get, you'll be in a different place than I think most of the people that didn't like it. Anyways, I'm not like selling you by telling you people didn't like this book, but I think that this is a good one for beginners because it does, like, you know, the early, I guess, parts of the book, there's a lot of like suspense and it sort of builds to the horror. It's not like in your face from the get-go. Anyways, check this one out. I really liked it. Another recommendation is When the Reckoning Comes by Latanya McQueen. This is maybe a little borderline of like intermediate horror fans, but because it is a little more gory and I think just like a little more, I don't know, hard to read. But it's about a Black woman who grew up in a small southern town, and she had two best friends, a boy who was Black and a girl who's white. And as soon as she graduated high school, she like booked it out of town. She did not want to live there anymore. And so she gets invited to her white friend's wedding, which happens to be on a plantation in South Carolina, I think is where it takes place. Can't remember. And obviously that is quite problematic for a number of reasons. And so she ends up going as like to be a good friend, but then weird stuff starts to happen because it's literally like on the plantation. So I know that that's a thing that really happens, and I actually talked to a taxi driver in Charleston about it once. Anyways, great book, definitely recommend. And the last one is like not a personal favorite of mine, but I know that like I'm kind of an outlier, and that is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. So this one is about, it takes place I think in the 90s or maybe the 80s, but I think it's the 90s. This suburban little book club who are all kind of like neighborhood busybodies and whatnot, and they get a new neighbor who they all kind of become convinced is a vampire. And that's kind of all you need to know. Personally, this wasn't like my favorite. I just didn't really like how it resolved, but lots of people love this. Lots of people love his books. And this one is pretty gory. There's some pretty gross scenes in here, but it's not like scary, scary. It's definitely on the campier side. So if you don't mind gore, but like are maybe a little nervous to try like a super, super scary book, that's a good one to try. And I've never read any other books by Grady Hendrix, but from what I hear, they all kind of tend to lean that way. So maybe give it a shot. So those are some good books to start out with if you are new to the horror genre. I would love to know what books you recommend if you are a horror reader, if you plan to read any of these, or what kind of spooky reading plans you have in mind. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, I would love it if you would, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!